Ken Hackathorn again with my buddy Bill Wilson. And we've got some of the most unique products that Wilson Combat has ever produced, and that's their specialty magazine lines. As a matter of fact, in many ways, you could say that this was kind of the backbone of your business, in the sense that the weak link in the 1911 pistol early on was reliable magazines. And you're the guy that actually stepped up to the plate and said, I'm going to make a mag that is worthy and reliable of the gun. And kind of, let's face it, the whole business kind of grew around the fact that you made the best magazine that was available in the market.
Yeah, that's correct for the accessory side of the business.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean,
and I know it's amazing. You take, this is kind of the old standby, the 47D, and you have had to sell a blue million of these things.
yeah, it's been a good product. I mean, as you know, it started out as just a 47, the 7-round version of that magazine, with a rounded follower and 7-round capacity, and that due to the needs of IPSC shooters for the extra round, that grew into an 8-round product called 47D.
And it's interesting, like so much of what goes on in the gun culture and the handgun world, the action shooting game, the competition world, has driven a lot of products.
Oh yeah, it's no different than auto racing.
Yeah, and literally back in our day when we were into that heavily, this magazine, the 8-rounder, kind of became, you just about had to have one to be competitive if you shot 45.
Yeah.
And that is interesting. From the 47 series, you moved next to the 500 series, or what we now know as Elite. Tell me about what was the major changes that you had to undertake to get this magazine where it's at today. What was the goals and what was the reasons for the changes?
Well, what we tried to improve was spring capacity. It was the number one thing. Wanted to improve spring capacity and wanted to make the tube even stronger than the 47D. And so with the added length, primarily due to the way that the base plate attaches, we were able to get an extra spring space in there. And then by moving the kind of our trademark window, slot windows rather than holes that we Wilson Combat mags have always been known for, moving those to the rear, that structurally made this tube stronger than when they're in the center line like that.
Okay.
So that's the two big changes. And kind of at the same time, we improved the spring technology, and that's even been over time. We've got better and better springs, and so now the product have 7 stainless springs in them that have a real long service life, even when they're left loaded.
Yeah. One of the things I know that was always an issue with these was because of the length of the tube. When you put the 8th round in, you didn't have much over travel.
Yeah.
And so when you're seeing a gun sometimes, you really had to give it a good thump to get it in. And the other thing we know is when you have that spring totally compressed and you leave the magazines loaded, it's really tough on the life of the spring.
Well, yeah, that's the other advantage of that. When you seat it in the gun, this mag seats much easier with 8 rounds in it than that mag seats in.
I think most of the guys I know that are still shooting 45s, for example, 1911s, this mag has become pretty much the standard measure. I mean, and the other thing I like about this is this different shape of the base plate. Actually grabbing it out of your pouch, you got a little bit more leverage as far as if it's kind of tight, you got a lot better ability to remove it from the magazine pouch. And I think this system right now is that the magazine that kind of everybody migrates to.
Also, in the rare instance that the mag's stuck in the mag well, you've got something at the front here to really hook your finger on it and pull that magazine out of the mag well. And this based on the success of this product here. And the trend of 1911s going to 9mm, then we did the 9mm version of the 500 series.
And I know that there have more than one iteration to get where you're at. I mean, this obviously was not historically the 9mm 1911s. Historically, in the past, were always somewhat iffy in reliability, and I think we both could agree that a lot of that, not all, a lot of that was on the existing magazine design that was in use. And yet, out of curiosity, I know you've probably put 2 or 3 variations before you got where you're at, or how did that shake?
I would say closer to 6 variations.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, these are made on progressive tooling, stamping tooling. That tooling is extremely expensive. So when you make that tool, you want to make sure it's right. And so we did several iterations where we laser cut them out and formed them and tested them and then tweaked them and laser cut out one with a little bit different dimension and checked it out until we finally got it right where we wanted as far as dialing it in.
Yeah, I use these things and I know now when you finally went to the steel follower design, it seemed like that was kind of the final step that really got this magazine to where you wanted it to go.
Yeah, that was kind of the final step. And then, like I say, we went to the stainless springs, which is actually a little better design as well as a more durable product as far as staying compressed.
And these are 10 rounds.
Yes, 10-round magazine.
Where the original magazines back in the day were predominantly 9 round.
Yes.
So with this magazine and gun around the chamber, you got 11 shooter in most cases on a full size.
And on the compact, we have one that's 9 rounds, so you got a 10-round gun
Wow.
with a compact with the same base plate as this one.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. You know, I noticed the magazine on the end is kind of interesting in that you were one of the first guys to come up with the 10-round mag. Wasn't the bureaucrat what you called it back in the Clinton era
Yeah,
or whatever?
yeah, we brought it out during that ban, and so we call it the bureaucrat just to kind of.
But I know that magazine, I mean, there were some issues you felt you needed addressed, and obviously this new one, I know you gave me a sample a year or so ago, and man, it has proven to be above and beyond what I expected. And tell me about the changes in this mag.
Well, primary changes in it, we've got the dual rail feed lips at the top, because the issue with a 10-round mag with 45, that's a pretty heavy column of ammunition in there. And so if that's dropped on a hard surface when it's, fully loaded, or
It bounces.
I mean, it bounces and it wants to
tends to wedge
spread.
the lips apart.
Yeah, it wants to spread the feed lips on it. And the dual feed lip design, feed rail design there, that's eliminated that issue and allowed us to run a real heavy spring in there also. And then the base pad on it is, I think, a lot better design than the old one, because we did have sometimes with the old design, somebody smacked the mag in there really hard, they would actually knock that little spot welded tab off the front of them.
And overdrive it up in the gun.
Overdrive it up into the gun. So that kind of eliminated that. Plus, it looks a lot nicer too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've been very impressed with the success I've had with it. And then here's another magazine that I know was kind of a joint venture between Larry Vickers and Wilson Combat. And I know Larry talked to me back in the time when this thing was going on, and he said, when he was in the military, he was probably in the most elite special operations unit on this planet, and they used, particularly back in his era, they used 1911s, and the 47s and the 47Ds were kind of the standard of magazines. Mm-hmm. And while this magazine was basically born out of the competition demand, one of the things that he was aware of is due to the openings, if you drop them in dirt or mud and sand, you compromise reliability. I mean, you can foul the mag easily. So I know when he approached, he wanted to make some changes, and I get questioned all the time. What does the Vickers Tactical Mag have different than the other ones? And by the way, and they're the most expensive. They're quite pricey for a reason. And I always tell people, in order to understand that, I'll take my trusty Swiss Army knife here, and we'll take this mag apart, and we'll talk about some of the issues. In that, one of the features in the mag of the Wilson Vickers Tactical Mag is you guys use a square spring instead of a round spring.
Yeah, square wire.
And what's that about? I mean, tell me what the advantage is or what the feature is that this brings to the table.
Well, in the same amount of space, you get more tension. I mean, think about it. You got a round, round deal.
So it compresses, and you've got that working.
Yeah,
for you.
let's just say your wire diameter is 40 thousandths. A round wire 40 thousandths takes up the same space as a square wire 40 thousandths, but the square wire has more spring there.
And as far as life, is the square spring, in theory, a better life over a round one, or is there much difference?
I think the reason that you get more life with this spring is because it's not stressed as much.
Okay.
If you pull this magazine apart, you'll notice the spring's quite a bit longer than that one.
And is this a carbon steel or stainless?
That should be 17.7 stainless.
Okay, cool. So as far as rust and durability, it's not as big an issue. I noticed one of the changes, and Larry was very specific about, the follower needed to have grooves in it so that any sand or debris in there can freely be cleared so that the magazine is still functional instead of it binding up.
Yeah.
And that's required a different mold and a different part number. And by the way, it does the job. And then the other feature, of course, is with the exception of where the magazine catch engages and one hole in the rear where you can tell that you've got the eighth round in it, there's no openings.
Yeah.
So, and then also his mags are spec'd with a metal base plate, not the polymer like the Elites and the 40. And by the way, these are pretty rugged, but he wanted something, no matter what surface it was dropped on, it wasn't going to fracture. A lot of people don't realize that polymer, especially in sub-Arctic conditions, becomes fragile. All polymers do. And it's hydroscopic. Any moistures in there is going to freeze, and now you've got a more brittle part. So there's actually two versions. There's a steel base plate, which sticks down a bit, and this is aluminum, kind of a low profile.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is the Vickers magazines are more expensive, but there's a lot of more specialized product in the manufacturing process. And candidly, I'm a fan of them. For example, the ones I'm carrying now are the 9mm versions of the Vickers Tactical. And from a durability standpoint, I'm pretty impressed with them. So it looks to me like the products you've come out with for the 1911 magazine line, you've pretty much got all the bases covered now.
And it's been quite an evolution since 1980.
Yeah, boy. Some of the original 1980 47s you sent me, I have in my pile of mags. I still, once in a while, will dig a mag out and, and they still work fine. Now, I found out, like everybody, if you leave them loaded over a period of time, you probably have to replace the spring in it. Once in a while, you realize, man, that spring just has to be replaced. But otherwise, they're still going strong.
Well, the 7-rounders, the 47s, the spring is not under much stress at all. I mean, you can leave those loaded an awful long time and they'll still
And
function.
believe me, mine have. I remember the first ones you gave me as test. They were just samples. The welds up the back were a little, nothing like this. This is beautifully done. They look kind of like somebody had welded them at night in the shop. You know what? They work fine.
Well, I'm not sure we had robotic welding in
I
1980.
suspicion that I might have something to do with it. But overall, I think if we all agree, pretty much now the world standard in 1911 magazines is what you guys now provide via Wilson Combat.
Thank you again.
Good.